Welcome to the Glenn Mercer Show, where we talk all things vegan. If you're not already vegan, no worries, we'll get you there. If you are, tune in for health advice, information on climate change, and all the damage done by our most destructive industry, animal agriculture. We'll also talk cooking, theater, film, and culture. My 2 reasons for starting this podcast: to entertain, to inform, and to make people vegan. Oh, that's 3. Shit. Welcome to the Glenn Mercer Show. You can find us across all your favorite podcast platforms. You could find us on YouTube, and please remember to subscribe. And you can find us at realmeneatplants.com. Dr. Matthew Letterman is a board-certified internal medicine physician and a pioneering thought leader in holistic health. With his wife, Alona Pulday, he has co-authored 6 books, including this one, Keep It Simple, Keep It Whole, the New York Times bestseller, The Forks Over Knives Plan, and he was featured in the acclaimed documentary Forks Over Knives, which has created who knows how many thousands of vegans. Dr. Matt is the co-host of the WeBe Parents podcast, that's WEBE, a platform dedicated to equipping parents with tools and insights to foster emotional connection, resilience, and well-being in their families. His latest book, Wellness to Wonderful, I had the honor of being the editor on this book, and it weaves together medical science, psychology, spirituality, and life wisdom to guide individuals towards lasting health, vibrancy, peace, and joy. As the co-founder of Connection Docs, that's connectiondocs.com, Dr. Matt integrates the principles of nonviolent communication and emotional health with practical tools to enhance relational, and self-connection. Dr. Matt, good to see you. Welcome to the show.
Hey, thank you for being here. I appreciate it. Thank you for including me and wanting to talk.
All right. Well, thank you for wanting to say yes when I asked you if you wanted to talk.
Yes.
Um, let's talk about your medical journey, because you have not had a very conventional medical journey. Let's start with, where did you go to medical school?
I went to medical school in Philadelphia, Temple School of Medicine, North
Okay.
Philly.
All right. And when you went to medical school, what sort of doctor were you planning on becoming?
I wasn't sure. My father was a cardiologist, so I thought being a specialist would be fun. They seem to get more respect than the general practitioners. So I
Hmm.
was excited to be some type of specialist, but I wasn't particularly drawn to a specialty other than the idea of it.
Hmm.
So I wasn't sure.
And at that time, were you eating the standard American diet?
Yes, I was eating and drinking and living uh, without health as my primary focus. It was about survival in medical school, coupled with uh, relief and release. So when you work hard and then play hard.
Right,
So, and you would eat hard.
right. And you wouldn't get to sleep very much in
No,
medical school.
no, that was not the focus.
Did it feel like a kind of torture going through medical school, when and internships, when you would have to work super long hours, and was there a sense that it was almost like boot camp? You know, you have to get through this as hard as it is, then you get richly rewarded afterwards.
Yeah, I it was my personality, the way I was sort of socialized was to work hard and head towards some joy that will come as a result of that hard work. It wasn't about being in the present moment. So I would work hard to get good grades. I would work hard to get teachers to like me. I'd work hard to build up the resume to get into medical school or to get into college, to get into a good medical school, to get to a good residency, potentially to get to a good fellowship, to then get a good job. And then all of a sudden you pick your head up and you're 30 years old, 35 years old, and you're like, oh, is that worth it? So it's like this 35-year experiment. And what happened to me when I completed that experiment was conventional medicine was not um, meeting a lot of my needs. It wasn't meeting my needs for really contributing to patients in a meaningful way from my perspective. It wasn't helping them get healthier and happier and living better. And it wasn't, I didn't, I didn't feel an integrity with a lot of what we were doing. We would have patients come in and I would say, oh, we'll try this pill. And if that didn't work, they'd come back and say, I'm still miserable. I say, well, try this pill. And we would just circulate them through different pills. So it was hard work, and you just got good at it. Selects, I think the medical profession selects for people that can work hard and delay gratification in hopes of something better to come. And they can memorize things really well and they can do what they're told and follow directions really well.
Hmm.
And that ultimately was not, I was good at doing that, but I picked my head up after this 30-year experiment and realized that's not what makes me happy though.
So let's go to that moment when you're starting to feel disillusioned. You're about 30 years old. Where were you working? What sort of practice?
I was in residency. I started to think in, I got really good grades in the beginning of college, and then I was starting to get tired of working hard just to get good grades, but I still did well enough to get into medical school. In medical school, I was a average student. I wasn't top of the class, wasn't bottom of the class. Although you know, the joke, what do they call the person who graduates last in his medical school class or her medical school class?
What?
Doctor.
Right.
So you know, everybody in medical school has already been selected to be quite smart and effective and skilled. But I was about average, and then I was like, I'm not really loving this, but maybe it'll get better when. So I was still hoping that when I became a resident and I had more power and autonomy, it would be better. And then when I was a resident, I was like, still not really loving this. Maybe it'll get better when I'm an attending and I have my own practice. But it wasn't getting better. And about the beginning of my third year of residency is when I was pretty unhappy. And through a series of random events, found a book that was basically telling me. I remember halfway through saying, "You're going to feel better if you're vegan." And I was
What book
having,
was this?
it was called The Easy Way to Lose Weight. And I was interested in this book because I really liked this guy, Alan Carr, who wrote books on stopping smoking and stopping drinking. And he wasn't a medical professional. He was just a guy that had this technique. And I thought, and it was ultimately like natural hygiene. I learned later that's what informed his weight loss book. But I remember I remember reading through and thinking, wow, this is really interesting. And I liked to experiment on things. I wasn't feeling great. I had all sorts of gastrointestinal issues. I had
Were
fatigue.
you by any chance overweight yourself? Because you're a very slender guy.
I was
Yeah.
probably, 10 pounds overweight
Uh-huh.
from eating and drinking too much,
Yeah.
eating unhealthy foods. But it wasn't the main focus. I was doing the Atkins diet with a bunch of friends at the time too, which was funny because we thought that was the healthiest diet. Our expert opinion doing the Atkins diet. And we would tell patients to do the Atkins diet because that's what we were doing. Not because there was evidence or that we were any of my colleagues were familiar with any evidence on it. It's just what we told them and they would listen to us. So it's a testament to the power of doctors to be influential. Unfortunately, here I think that was harmful influence.
Yeah.
But
And at this time you're a resident?
a resident, beginning of my third year of residency, and I read this book and I said, this sounds crazy. I don't want to be vegan, but they're promising some pretty amazing things. So I'm the type of guy that also likes to experiment and think outside the box. So I tried this. I said, I'll do rice and beans for a week. And I did rice and beans for a week because I had to mix my rice and beans to get the right amount of protein in theory.
Uh-huh.
And I felt fantastic. And I was actually disappointed that I felt fantastic because I couldn't lie to myself that it didn't work. I felt really good. And that's what they said would happen. And I was sleeping better, and my bowels were functioning better, and my indigestion went away. And I'm like, damn, this is unfortunate because I don't want to be vegan.
Uh-huh.
And then I did I said, well, let me come up with another excuse. I said, well, I would, even though I feel better, you're not going to get enough protein. You're going to die from protein deficiency. And I said, so I got a book to learn about that. And it turned out you got more than enough protein. I'm like, damn. All right, well, what about calcium? I don't think you can get enough calcium. So I'm looking for reasons that I can't do this. And they kind of said, oh my God, you get enough calcium too. So I'm like, damn. And then I said, well, I can't live off rice and beans for the rest of my life. So I got a vegan cookbook and I said, there's no way this is gonna, this is gonna be possible long term. And I tried making vegan French toast. It took about 5 hours. And I had to shop for all these ingredients I never heard of. And it tasted delicious. And at that point I said, damn, I'm gonna do this. And I was just, from then on, I said, I don't have to be vegan, but I'm going to try and make everything I love vegan. And if I can't make something I love vegan, then I'll use animal products as a last resort. So that way I didn't force myself to be vegan, but I had to try everything else first. And that helped me stick with it. And I have been vegan ever since, and whole food plant-based was shortly after that.
So after 30 years and after some research and some reading, you got hooked by vegan French toast.
Vegan French toast is what did it. Who knew?
Wow.
And it
And I
was
don't think I've
delicious.
even ever had vegan French toast.
Ah,
I
this was good.
remember French toast as a kid, which had some kind of like eggy thing in
Yeah,
it, right?
exactly. It
So
was like
what
an
do you
egg.
use to replace the eggs in vegan French toast?
This was like there was like an egg replacer that was vegan, and they
Yeah.
something with I remember I have to remember back, but I don't eat the French toast now actually.
Yeah.
But it was at the time I remember liking French toast. I said, oh, let's try this one. And I think there was some kind of flaxseed mixture in there and the egg replacer, and you couldn't didn't use butter. So it was, but it was a really good bread, and I still could use syrup, and it was this mixture coated the bread really nicely, and it was delicious. And I said, whoa, who would have thought?
Well, that vegan French toast recipe influenced vegan history. You went on to do forks over knives and all these other
There we
things.
go.
So it's a
Thank
great recipe.
goodness. Thank goodness for French toast.
Yeah.
And to this day, that will still happen where you crave something. Kylie, for her birthday, Kylie's my daughter. She's just turned 13. And we walked by a Cinnabon at Universal Studios. And she said, oh my God, what's that smell? That's delicious. And we go, that's Cinnabons. And she said, I said, one of those has like 2,000 calories, and if it's enough for the entire day, it'll kill you if you eat this thing, but it's delicious. And she said, well, I want one of those. So Alona figured out, and Kylie has Crohn's disease. So Alona figured out how to make this, because she wanted to give Kylie still meet that flavor, the needs for the food without doing it in an unhealthy way. And Alona made a gluten-free, without added, she used date sugar, no added oil, no other added sweeteners, and no added salt, no added sodium. And she made this thing, and it was so delicious that me and Jordan were eating them, and we're telling, she's making them again. They were so good that you're supposed to put this vegan frosting on them, and we didn't even need the vegan frosting. So I was like, this is even, how many years later is this? This was, a few weeks ago. And haven't had cinnamon buns for decades because I used to eat Cinnabons
Uh-huh.
or something like it. I don't know if Cinnabon, but I remember eating these things that were like these big things with the white frosting, drenching it, and we were able to do it. And that's what's so exciting, is that nowadays you can make anything you want. And a lot of people don't have the gluten-free limitation. And if they just want to be vegan, they don't have to worry about added oil or added sodium. And Alona did this with, all of those factors involved too. So it is so possible now that you don't have to be deprived at all.
Now, did you meet Alona in medical school?
I met Alona when I was an attending at Kaiser. She was a resident,
Okay.
and I met her there. It was a little bit of like Grey's Anatomy type of drama. So I saw her and pursued her, and then we eventually started our own clinic together. This was before Forks Over Knives. We had a little concierge nutrition lifestyle health clinic.
Now, when you were at Kaiser, were you already vegan?
Yes, I was
Okay.
vegan. In fact, I remember telling one of my partners who I was a hospitalist at Kaiser, and
What does that mean, a hospitalist? It means you
you
work in a
just work with
hospital?
patients in the hospital.
Okay.
So you don't do outpatient. You just deal with patients that need internal medicine care in the hospital.
Okay.
And one of my partners, I was walking out the door at them, I'll never forget. And I said, I just got my cholesterol back, and it was my total cholesterol was 125. And I said, I'm pretty excited by this. And she looked at me with a little bit almost like snarky, almost disgust. She's like, what are you, vegan or something? And I said, two things just showed me right there. One is that vegan is a bad word, that there's something wrong with vegans. It's frowned upon. And two, that she knew that you could get your cholesterol down that low, but you had to be vegan.
Right.
So it's not news. So
Right.
that was one of the very memorable experiences. And that's, shortly after that is when I went to my head of the hospitalist group, and I said, I'm going to leave and start my own nutrition and lifestyle medicine clinic focused around this. And he said, if you don't take insurance, and are people going to pay for this? How is this? How are you going to survive? How are you going to make this work? And I said, we'll figure out a way. So it's not easy, but I felt much more in integrity than going in. And I would see all these patients that either had, you'd see someone with a heart attack. It's directly related to what they're eating, or you would see people with other issues that were much more difficult to heal because of their dysfunctional immune systems, their being so overweight, and the impact that the diet and lifestyle has, and how all of that puts them in these pro-inflammatory, toxic states that make diseases otherwise that usually would be reversible much harder to reverse. And I was just so frustrated trying to throw medicine at a problem where they were eating, you're basically putting gasoline on the fire 3 times a day, and I'm trying to put that fire out, and we couldn't.
All right. Let's go back to that first week when you had the rice and beans. You had been having some digestive problems, and you felt so much better after a week of rice and beans. And you said, damn, this seems to be working. At what point do you say to yourself, wait a minute, everything I was taught in medical school, everything about the way I'm treating patients is related to what I've just learned on the rice and beans diet for a week. And so this is not going to just affect the way I eat, this is going to affect the way I practice medicine. When did that revelation come?
At first, I was just doing this for me. I wasn't clear on the
Right.
impact on health to the extent I learned that actually. I watched, I don't remember what got me to watch this documentary. I don't know if you heard the documentary, The Rave Diet by Mike Anderson.
No.
So he did something, and he had Esselstyn and Campbell. I believe Campbell was in it, but he had some other people in there. And I said, "Oh, this is interesting." And in there, I looked up the China study because it must have been Campbell, must have been in there. And I read the China study, and that's when I started learning about the impact on health. I learned about McDougall. I emailed McDougall. I still have the email today that I sent him saying that I learned about this. I'm in a conventional hospitalist position, and I want to do this work with you. Are you hiring? He said, no, I'm not hiring, but he sent me a bunch of stuff and DVDs and books and things. And I reached out to Joel Furman, and I read his Eat to Live book. And I remember being like, wow, this really can help people's health. But I, at the time, because I was so disillusioned with conventional healthcare, but I still need to make a living, I was going to leave. I was going to go and become a palliative care physician. So I had a palliative care fellowship set up and because that's what I was going to do, even though I was eating a plant-based diet, I didn't think about helping other people with it as a career. So I was going to go into palliative care, and my stepmother was visiting, and she said, Matt, because I was at that point telling them all about the impact of diet, and my whole family knew about it. And they said, Matt, palliative care is great that you can help people, because I liked palliative care because that was where medication actually, in my opinion, really helps people. They're struggling. You have time to talk to them and connect with them, and you can give them medication to make them more comfortable. We could do that really well. So to me, the tools that we were given and the training that we employed aligned very much with the patient values as well. There was a lot of alignment. So I was interested. I was like, at least I could do that and feel good about myself. And then my stepmother said, Matt, palliative care, you can't really, it's a little late to help people. You could help people much earlier. And she said, why don't you do this diet and lifestyle stuff for people before they need palliative care? And I said, oh, that's a good idea. So that's what got me to reach out to John McDougall and Joel Furman and say, are you hiring? And that's when I told my palliative care fellowship that I'm not going to come and that I'm going to do this instead. Actually almost flew, I was in Los Angeles at the time. I almost flew to New Jersey because Joel Furman I was going to work with Joel. But that's when I had met Alona and we were just dating, and she did not want to go to New Jersey. And it was too early. We were just started dating. And I was going to go out there. And I said, Joel, I met this girl, so I don't think I don't think I'm going to come out. I want to see where this goes, and I'm glad I
Uh-huh.
did because it went as high as you could imagine. So
Yeah.
but I was almost going to move out and work with Joel, at least to get out. I didn't have to do palliative care. I could get into practicing this way full time. But that didn't happen. So then I stayed in Los Angeles and we opened this clinic.
Well, as I'm taking in your story, Dr. Matt, it seems to me that perhaps the two greatest influences on your life were your stepmother and French toast. So,
Who would have
uh,
thought?
now when you met Alona, was she a vegan?
It was, I think, like a pretty clean Mediterranean diet. She would still
Okay.
have olive oil.
Uh-huh.
She would still have like chicken once in a while,
Mm-hmm.
but it was easy. She would have these big salads. She would have like the processed veggie burger, let's say, the
Mm-hmm.
soy-based veggie burger.
Right.
But she ate a much healthier diet at baseline.
Okay.
But I remember one of our first arguments was over olive oil. So she early on, I mean, she didn't have any of this. She hadn't read any of the books. She
Right.
just was preaching conventional wisdom,
Right.
and olive oil was healthy.
Yeah.
So I was telling her she was wrong, and I did not have the skills of nonviolent communication at the time.
Yeah.
So I came in and told her how she was wrong, and I was gonna enlighten her, and that doesn't go well.
Right. There are a couple of vegan docs out there who promote a diet that you and I would basically agree with, but for some reason they allow olive oil or even
Yeah.
promote olive oil. So there are still some advocates of olive oil out there.
Yeah, and to me, olive oil, a little bit of anything isn't going to make or break you. It's what
Right.
you do most of the time that really matters.
Right.
But this idea that you can take an olive, extract one single macronutrient, fat, isolate that into a bottle, and just drink that. And it's the most calorie dense thing on the planet. No
Right.
nutrients, really. And somehow that's a health food. But if you take another macronutrient out of another whole food, let's say all the carbohydrate out of corn, and you create corn syrup, that is the most toxic thing on the planet because you have a bottle of corn
Yeah.
syrup instead of which is the macronutrient, the carbohydrate,
Right.
versus you have a bottle of olive oil, which is the macronutrient of the fat. And I'm like, what's the difference here? You're extracting from this whole food this one little thing, and people are carrying on like that's the most amazing thing, and you got to pour that all over your food. It doesn't make sense. And when things don't make sense to me that way, even
Right.
if I don't understand it, I'm going to explore it and look it up and try and make sense of it. And it seems like some people don't do that.
Right. That's exactly right, and that's the way I tend to think of nutrition. Is that when you're eating whole plant foods, you're getting all the macronutrients. Even fruit has a tiny bit of protein. You know,
Yes.
oats have fat. You know, so you're getting everything, and you don't have to worry terribly much about what percentage of the macronutrients you're getting. I mean, you should have enough consciousness not to eat coconut all day long because you'll be getting too much fat. and too much saturated fat. But in general, if you eat a range of plant foods, you don't even have to think about that. How much protein I'm getting, how much fat. As long as you're eating whole plant foods, you're generally good.
Yeah. I give people the challenge to create a diet of whole plant foods that meet your caloric needs and show me some nutrient that you're deficient in,
Right.
whether it's an essential amino acid or an essential fatty acid or some other nutrient. And I have yet to have somebody come up to me and show me a diet that's incomplete. Now, B12 would be
Right.
one, but we can talk about that if you want. But that's other than that, you get all of your nutrient requirements. In fact, a lot of people with this protein craze are getting too much. In fact, people are saying, "How do I get enough protein?" I'm worried about getting too much protein.
Right.
I want to get less.
Right.
People look at me like I'm crazy.
Right. No, I think you're right. And the body doesn't store excess protein. So what
Right.
is the purpose of a surplus of protein?
Yeah, people think that if you eat it, somehow it gets jammed into your bicep. And I'm like, how does that work? It doesn't work that way.
No, I don't think so. Um, now, you began a practice then, and you were giving your patients food therapy. You were working with your patients on their diet. Is that right?
Yeah, we did a whole, I mean, just like the Forks Over Knives film, we would take people, educate them, tell them what to do, help them plan, and then help them transform their kitchen, take them shopping. Because a lot of it is they don't know what to buy and where it is. So we would take them to their local supermarket, show them exactly what to buy. There's a wall of barbecue sauces.
Mm-hmm.
Here's the one. Rather than having to read each label, we would just point it out for them. So you removed a lot of the
Right.
weight. And then I would take it home and we would cook these foods and show them, here's how you make this real quick, and here's how you make this snack, and this is a basic cooking technique. And I'd put it in their mouths so they could actually taste it. And then all of a sudden they're like, okay, this is doable. Because you've taken them, instead of them thinking about it, and there's this big barrier to entry, you've actually sort of dragged them through the process from leaving their making a decision and leaving their house to buying all the products to preparing them to tasting it. And if you take them through that process, it's much more likely they're going to be able to do it and continue doing it.
And where was this practice that you set up,
It was in
practicing
Los Angeles.
in Los Angeles?
Yeah, we were working out of we converted a guest house from Alona's grandfather, and
Hmm.
we'd use that.
Okay. And how long were you practicing medicine that way, um, uh, before you moved on to what I think was the next position, which was with Whole Foods?
So we started, Alona and I started in the fall of 2007. So we had a clinic from 2007 to 2000, basically the summer of 2010, not fall of 2010. So about 3 years. And then we switched over to Whole Foods and shut down the clinic.
Okay. And so tell us what you did with Whole Foods.
So with Whole Foods, it's funny. Met John Mackey at a McDougall conference, the CEO and co-founder of Whole Foods. And I had our first book, Keep It Simple, Keep It Whole, that we self-published. And I followed him during a break to the bathroom. And he goes, "Oh, here I have his book. I think you're going to like it." Because I knew he was into the diet and lifestyle. And he said, "Hey, man, I'm trying to go to the bathroom here." So I said, "Sorry." But he took the book. I walked out. I came back. I remember telling Alona, I don't know what's going to happen. He didn't seem to be happy that I followed him into the bathroom, but he did come back the next morning. He found me sitting in the conference and he came
Uh-huh.
up to me and said, "I read half your book last night.
Uh-huh.
And in there you wrote that you want to open clinics like this all over the country. And I would love to do that too. Let's talk at lunch."
Okay.
So we met at lunch, had a great time, connected around what we want to do, and very quickly decided that we were going to try and work with Whole Foods Market to create clinics that support patients in this way.
And where were those clinics and did they how successful were they?
We had two clinics. We had a clinic in Glendale and we had one in Austin. And they were successful in the sense that they decreased healthcare costs by about 20%. They
For Whole
patients,
Foods, for Whole Foods own employees?
if it was just for Whole Foods employees at the time.
Mm.
And it was also um, patients loved it. The doctors that were treating patients in there were happy. We had health coaches, we had acupuncturists, we had mental health support. So it was a very enjoyable experience. And then it was a matter of testing, like there was a lot of people that believe that more healthcare is better. So I got to, I got to get all of the treatments, that conventional medicine, all the testing, when in fact, you and I know that that can actually cause harm. So we had to create a health plan that incentivized being educated and learning
Mhm.
how this all works so that they were financially incentivized to take the time to learn so they could make a more informed decision. And when that happened, they were actually quite grateful. And then we found specialists that would align with what the evidence really showed versus just trying to push more treatments, more surgeries, and things like that. So you had to find the specialists that the doctors all knew about and they would send their family to. And that's the one that we wanted to work with. And we created a network that way, but it took time. So we had to not only create the centers, then we had to create a health plan, and we had to create a health system network. We had to find hospitals that would support. And this was with very little resources because it was a grocery store.
Right.
And we were doing it grassroots. We were setting it up ourselves. So we even talked to at the later, and so it was doing well. Everybody was happy, but we to expand as quickly as we wanted would be challenging. So we talked to Amazon had recently bought them, and we talked to them, and Amazon wanted us. How do you help? Uh, you know, hundreds of thousands of employees at a time, and we didn't have a system set up to do that. So we wanted to try and figure that out, but like in the end, I don't think that was what they wanted to do. I'm not sure whatever happened with Amazon. I know they eventually, I believe they bought or partnered with One Medical. I don't know if you heard of that company. We actually met with One Medical early on at Whole Foods. They were just starting their clinics at the time. And it was one of the founders of the guy who had created an app. I think it was Hippocrates, which was a well-known app for the PDAs, not for the iPhone. This was before the iPhone. And you could look up drugs on this little PDA thing. So, smart guy driven. But in the end, we had to find a way to grow and have people support that growth in a way that still maintain the integrity of what we we're doing. Because if you just grow using the systems in place, you're going to use systems that are broken, that are pushing care that is not helping patients, that is not, in my opinion, evidence-based, and then creating a system that can support patients to learn this new information. It's almost like going through a McDougall program, and people go and say, I don't want that care anymore because they know how it can harm them. But
Right.
that's an evolution. So we wanted to create a system that supported that. And after a while, we were a lot of rolling a boulder uphill with all the systems that were in place, legal, HR with the health plans, and they wanted to do things conventional. And we were the sort of squeaky wheel on the side, couple of centers, and they're trying to deal with hundreds of thousands of employees. And we're working with thousands of employees instead of hundreds of thousands. So Alona and I said, we'd like to do something where we can evolve and create and grow quickly and try new things. And that's after about 10 years, that's when we said, hey, let's go do our next evolution. We also wanted to bring connection into it, connection and interpersonal relationship as a much more foundational principle of optimizing health, next to the diet versus a little add-on afterwards.
Right.
And that was not as aligned with people that were just focused on medicine or food. And we wanted to be, there's medicine, there's food, there's interpersonal, there's connection, there's how we communicate. All of that affects your physical health. And that wasn't as aligned. So that's when Alone and I just said, let's just do it ourselves. It's been a fun ride. And John actually, our boss at Whole Foods, and John, everybody eventually left, and they're doing something right now outside of it as well. So everybody is
And
trying
did
to do
Amazon
it to,
pull the plug on these clinics?
I believe they did. I think that's when they partnered with, I think One Medical and systems that could manage hundreds of thousands of employees at a time.
Okay.
I don't know. When I left, the clinics were still there, but my understanding is that they're no longer functioning, or maybe it's all centralized. I don't
And were the
remember.
clinics attached to the stores or in a different location?
One one was below the store in Austin, and in the headquarters in Austin, and one was in Los Angeles or Glendale. That was not. It was near the headquarters, but not.
Mhm. Okay. So at what point do you and Alona begin to feel that pure attention to the physical body and to nutrition is not enough? That there are these other factors at play that you wrote about in
Yeah.
Wellness to Wonderful that have to do with connection and spirituality and nature awareness, being in nature, that all affect your health.
So when I would say I had issues where I would have, aches and pains. I would get bloating or gastrointestinal, and I would think it was a food sensitivity, or you know, I can't eat gluten or something like that. And I would make a change, and it was around, I would say, the fall of 2017, when I'd always been interested in interpersonal work, just with my marriage and with raising kids, but I didn't connect it to my physical health so much until we were trying to move, and we were going to buy our first house, and it was new construction. It was in another city, and boy, was that stressful. I don't recommend that being someone's first house experience at all.
Mhm.
But it was all sorts of problems, and I was stressed out, and it didn't end on time, and it was costing more, and it was a whole mess. And we were relocating away from Alona's family, which the kids loved, and it was just so many stressors. And I got the worst sciatica back pain I've ever had. I mean, I don't remember. I had back pain off and on, but this was just unrelenting. It was constant. And I was trying all sorts of physical therapy. And I was like, maybe it's inflammation. So I was doing like elimination diets, and I was doing everything that I knew. And I couldn't get this. And I would see the doctors, and they'd say, well, we could do surgery, but we're not sure it's going to help. But like, we could try messing around in there. And I read it, and I was like, there's no benefit of doing surgery. It's clearly not going to fix this problem, because there's no neurological deficits. There's no weakness. It was all pain. And I remember somebody telling me, a friend of mine who was into she was does hypnotherapy. And we were meeting, and she said, Matt, you should read this book. And I'm like, oh boy, here we go again. And she said, Matt, it might be something that's going on in your head. And I was like, what are you talking about? This is my back, not my head. I got very defensive. But again, I can't just let those things go. So I remember listening to this book. And as I'm listening to this book while I'm driving, they're describing the person that typically has this problem. And they called it TMS, but it's sometimes called neural pathway pain or neural circuit pain. But I remember listening to it, and I'm like, oh my God, I'm like the poster child. They're describing me. And I'm like, damn, you know, just like with the diet, I'm like, damn, I gotta
Characteristics like being driven and hardworking.
driven, type A, high stress, overachiever,
Yeah.
perfectionist, struggles with, wants approval, self-worth, all sorts of social things. And I'm like, oh, like this is so
Right.
me. And I'm sort of like annoyed that I'm going to have to try this because I can't just let it go.
Right.
And that's when I call, and but what they were saying was it wasn't about like eating something, which to me was easy, just eat
Right.
this instead of this. They were saying that there's these suppressed emotions like rage and anger and sadness that you're not feeling. And when you suppress these emotions, your body starts to interpret that as dangerous, as a threat, that you can't share them. And the more stress you have, the more your body is interpreting that as dangerous and threat. And when you do that, your body creates pain signals as a way to try and help you manage threat. So, for example, when you have a broken hand and you have a cut on your hand and your body wants you not to keep hitting it so that it opens up and you want to leave it alone so it heals, it's going to generate pain around that area until it heals. Or if you have a broken foot, it's going to make it hurt when you walk on it so you don't walk on it and cause more damage. So
Right.
pain is actually trying to protect us. So with this idea, and I'm simplifying it, but basically your body can, when there's social and spiritual and mental threat or danger, your body can inappropriately activate old pain pathways. Because once you create a pain pathway, it's there for life. It's a neural pathway. But when the tissue heals, you stop sending traffic down that pathway. But when you have this suppressed or suppression of emotion or this increased stress they call allostatic load, it can reignite an old pathway as your brain's attempt to try and deal with this threat. And I remember being like, first, it was super hard to understand. It was even harder to believe that that actually existed. That was actually a thing. And then on top of that, I'm like, well, what do I do? Okay, let's say I believe it. How do I deal with it? I'm ready. I don't want to suppress it anymore. How do I get it out? Okay, I'm angry. But it wasn't as clear to me what to do. And I had a nonviolent communication coach that I knew just sporadically. We had talked to her about some stuff with kids and parenting, but I didn't work with her regularly. And I emailed her and I said, I need to feel, supposedly I'm suppressing feelings. And I said, can you help me feel these feelings that I'm suppressing? It's supposed to help my back. And and she said, yes. And I said, great. So I started working with her. And at first I didn't realize this, but I had only three feeling words. I would say I felt good, I felt bad, or I felt angry. And she
Huh.
said, that's not all the feeling words, Matt. We got to expand your feelings vocabulary. And that's when I started learning that I was suppressing. It was good and I got to go after it. It's bad. I got to make it go away, or I'm angry and the hell with everything. So that was enlightening. And then I started working with her every week. I would meet with her and I would talk and we'd figure this out. And I'd learn how to communicate. And she would talk about self connecting to your body. I'm like, what the hell does that mean? Like, what do you mean feel my body? What are you talking about? But she taught me how to do it and she helped me experience it. And I started to get it. And I started talking and we're interacting with Alona differently and my kids differently. And about 3 months in, my pain went away. And I was like, this was like months and months and months. And it was starting to get better quickly. But after 3 months, I remember being like, holy crap, I don't have any pain. And I couldn't believe it. And I said, there's got to be something here. This is just doesn't. And then I started learning more. And that's when I was loving nonviolent communication that I said, you know what? I want to become certified as a trainer so that I can teach this and I can learn what I don't know and become really skilled at it. And that's when I started adding it in. And then because I was lowering my threat load, I was sleeping better, and didn't realize I used to wake up and my body would feel tension, almost like I finished exercising or I was sore when I woke up. And I'm like, why am I sore when I wake up? And that went away. And so there were so many things that started my mental health, my outlook continued to improve. And then I started learning, I would read more and I would learn about polyvagal theory and the cell danger response and the CTRA response. And all of these were people in their own little silos learning about how you interact with the environment affects your physical health. It affects at the cellular level, whether you create pro-inflammatory cytokines or anti-inflammatory cytokines at the cellular level. At the gene level, that's another guy who was talking about how you interact with the environment, turns on and off different genes in the immune system. So if you are lacking meaning and purpose in your life, that actually increases inflammation, decreases your ability to fight cancer, it increases metastases, it decreases your ability to fight viruses. And he would have data on that. And then there was another guy talking about how your autonomic nervous system and how what you hear and how the messages that go to your gut to tell it to function or to sort of slow down are dependent upon how you're experiencing your environment and how safe you feel in your environment. And it's not mentally, like you can think you're safe, but it's actually the part of your body that can drive a car and get somewhere 10 minutes later, you have no idea how you got there because you just sort of your mind wandered, but you somehow didn't wreck the car.
Mm-hmm.
That part of your body is what needs to know that it's safe. And a lot of times it doesn't care what you think. It'll say, you can think you're safe, but I'm interpreting the environment and you do not feel safe. So if you're going minute to minute from project to project and you overschedule yourself and you got people that are angry at you and you're watching violent movies and you're all of a sudden your body's taking that in and saying, I don't care what your head thinks. This is not a safe environment. We are going to have to protect you because you're going to hurt yourself. And that's when it can turn on these pathways inappropriately. And if you can help them feel safe and then also learn that there's a cycle, because when they get the pain, then they think that pain is dangerous. There's something harmed. There's some harm in their body that's happening. And then they feel more danger and more threat. So you also have to help them understand that pain is actually not tissue damage and that it's real pain, but it's not because of tissue that's damaged or going to be hurt. And then they can start to feel safe around that. So there's this whole process that to me is so powerful and has helped us help people where diet alone couldn't help them. And there's so many people out there that are just doing this neural pathway pain treatment, but they're
Mm-hmm.
not getting the diet.
Right.
And I think they're missing out as well.
Well, I was going to say that I see an analogy to the rice and beans because when you started the rice and beans, you were almost hoping it wouldn't work. You weren't expecting it to work, much less expecting it to change your whole approach to medical practice.
Yes.
And when you learned about emotional awareness, you weren't really thinking that that was the cause of your sciatica pain.
All right, if you've ever wanted to show off your plant-based lifestyle and do it in style, here's your chance. We have some of the most amazing t-shirts, hats, accessories, coffee mugs, and more at shop.realmeneatplants.com. We have statement t-shirts that will bring a smile to everyone's face. I love the I want tofu tonight tee. Plus, we have podcast tees, real women eat plants gear, real kids eat plants, and real people eat plants, just in case men, women, and kids didn't cover it all. Yeah, we love you and love that you want to show off that healthy lifestyle of yours. Again, check out our high-quality gear at shop.realmeneatplants.com and enjoy.
All right, we just took a brief pause, but I was saying that Dr. Matt, I see an analogy to the rice and beans that you had experimented with for a week years before because you weren't really expecting it to change your health, but it did. You hadn't even been rooting for it to change your health, but it did. And it not only changed your health, but it changed your whole approach to practicing medicine. And similarly, you probably didn't expect that emotional awareness would make your sciatica go away, but it did. And it also, again, changed your whole approach to practicing medicine. Is that right?
Yeah, it was very much like that, where I didn't want to have to do something that seemed so crazy to me at the time when I first heard it. But thank goodness I am open enough to at least try it and experiment
Hmm.
and really dive in to test it out. And it's that openness that I really hope people will consider because it can make a huge difference in your life. So I get both sides. I get thinking like this is crazy. And at the same time, if it can help, at the time, I didn't even understand the science behind it. Now there's actually a lot of science behind how this can work, that you got nothing to lose and everything to gain.
So now, when you work with patients, it's an integrative approach in which you're dealing with their physical health, with their blood work and their metabolism, and you're also dealing with their emotional health. Do you sometimes feel like you're a psychiatrist and an internist at the same time?
I think that the ideal health system doesn't separate mind and body. I think that the ideal health system will support it all and give people, ideally primary care physicians, give them the basic skills to approach different areas. And then when you need specialists to really dive in or spend more time in that area, you can do that as well. In fact, me and Alona have areas that we both specialize in. I really focus, I enjoy the nonviolent communication, helping couples, helping parents with kids, helping do a leadership coaching and work teams, but all of that affects your health. In fact, one of the biggest indicators of or predictors of chronic pain is how happy you are in your job. So it's all connected because one affects the other. And I think leaving one out and focusing on the other is not helpful or ultimately effective. There's also Alona, who loves the women's health and nutrition and helping people navigate weight loss. The funny thing is she'll get people coming in who want to lose weight, and they wind up fixing all these issues with their family. They find new meaning and purpose in their lives. And then using food and the way they were using food that caused the weight to stay on is no longer an issue. So it's stepping back, just like with diet. And a lot of the plant-based doctors say, hey, we're not, the conventional healthcare system is focused on the symptom, not the problem. So you got to step back and change what you eat. But what I would say is just focusing on what you eat is still sometimes a symptom and not the problem. You got to step back further. And then when you get all of this in order, if you know what you should be eating, then you'll be able to eat that food more successfully when you get the rest of your life in order. Now, there's a group of people that don't know what they should be eating, and you tell them what they should eat, and they just do it. But there's a much bigger group that knows what they should eat and has trouble eating it anyway. And that's the group that needs to step back further.
Okay. Now, you use the technique of nonviolent communication. Could you define that for us?
I will try. It is a hard thing to define what the essence of it is. I can tell you that there's sort of two frameworks of interacting with people. There's the framework of, I know what's right, I know what's wrong, or I know what you should do or what you shouldn't do. This is good, this is bad. That's one framework. Who's right and who's wrong. There's another framework, which is, let's care about each other's needs and try to meet everybody's needs to make life more wonderful for everybody. The way you think, the way you talk to other people as well as yourself can shift, that. So if I think there's such a thing as a good person, a bad person, someone can do something right, someone can do something wrong, versus I think, hey, this person is doing something that's really not meeting my needs, and I would love to be able to do it differently. And I know that this person cares about these needs, even if he's not connected to that care in the moment. Shifting how I think creates that nonviolence, shifting how I see the world, because the way you see the world right now is determined by how you were brought up. It's not your choice any more than what you eat was not your choice. It was what you were brought up eating. The way you talk, the way you think, and the way you see the world is also because of how you were brought up. You can choose to shift that, but it takes some work to create those new habits, to think differently and try doing it differently. So nonviolent communication is more about how you think and how you perceive other people, and then how you communicate in a way that's going to focus on the connection between the two of you. Versus I'm going to talk in a way that's going to tell you what's right and wrong, diagnose what your problem is, blame you, criticize you, guilt you, shame you. That would be considered violent communication. I'm going to stop there because, like I said, it's more of a way of relating and connecting than it is a specific technique.
Okay. Now, is there a relationship between the fact that the diet that we advocate is a nonviolent diet, doesn't require the slaughtering of animals,
Yes,
and the communication approach that you advocate is considered nonviolent in I guess in its lack of judgment and blame and guilting. Do you see the two as being related in that
I
sense?
do. I see them related 100%. My one of my mentors in nonviolent communication was also a dietitian, and she used to say she cares about what goes in her mouth and what comes out of it.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
And that's how I think about it. And I have a hard time. There's the whole nonviolent movement that's all the nonviolent communication movement is all focused on talking and thinking and compassion to other people, but they eat animals.
Uh-huh.
And I'll say, how can you eat animals and preach that compassion is your true north? Now, I have to watch because just saying that can actually come from a violent energy, and so if I think it's wrong what they're doing, and I
Uh-huh.
think they should be vegan, I am now in that sort of that violent communication paradigm. So I have to do some work myself before I even open my mouth so that I can get to compassion for them and understanding for them, as well as communicate not from a should energy, but from a, hey, this would meet more needs. What's your reaction when I share this? So do you see how I have to sort of shift internally before I can even communicate to them with nonviolence?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, is there anything wrong with having judgment, feeling, oh, what this politician said is wrong, or what this person did is wrong? It was cruel. It was uncaring. Um, and if you have that thought, is that uh, is that a violation of
No,
nonviolent communication?
no, our judgments, we were, but I want people to understand is that you don't choose to have judgments. You were taught to communicate your feelings and needs through judgments. That's how you were brought up. That's how you've been educated. That's how everybody around you talks. That's how what you see in the movies. So it's the same as if I all of a sudden come to you and say, well, speaking Japanese is a much more connected experience, and speaking English is not. Is speaking English wrong? It's just a different experience. So I would say to you is you judgments are how we get connected to our unmet needs. But then what I would say is don't share your judgments if your goal is connection. Translate your judgments into feelings and needs, and you're more likely to connect and as a result get your needs met. Sharing your judgments is going to decrease the chances that you're going to meet your needs. So for example, if I said to Alona, I think it is early on, let's use our example. It is wrong to eat olive oil. It is unhealthy, and you shouldn't do it. So I just gave her a should.
Mm-hmm.
I gave her a moralistic judgment. It's wrong. I told her, and I diagnosed her as uninformed. So then am I likely to get my need met? More often than not, you're not even clear what your need is. My need there is probably, I would love to have a shared reality, because if we're going to work together, it's going to make things more effective. I also would love for her to be open and curious about new information. And because this is enlightening to me, I would love for her to be interested in not only openness, but growth and learning. And if she doesn't experience it the same way when she reads it, I would love to be able to dialogue collaboratively. Maybe there's something I could learn.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if I want her to be open and learn, is the sharing my judgment that what she did is wrong, is that going to increase her openness and desire to learn, or decrease it? It's going to decrease it. So if my goal is to get my needs met and to care about her, judging her doesn't do either of those things. But if I share, hey, Alona, I really want you to experience this with care and connection. And there's some things that are coming up to me around some of the foods that you're choosing to eat. And I'm just wondering, how does it feel if we even talk about this? Because I don't want you to feel defensive or any sense of judgment. So you see how I'm starting through the conversation just to get some alignment and some connection with her. Why am I talking? Am I trying to change her? Because if I think this is right and I want to change her, her need for autonomy is going to come up. So I'm aware that I want her to have a lot of choice. And then I want her to know, why am I talking? Am I judging her? No, I really would love to be a partner in this and explore this together and maybe see if she's open. And she's like, oh, you just want me to be open, but you're not demanding that I stop eating olive oil? If she trusts that, then she's going to be open. So all in how I think is going to affect how I communicate, which is going to affect how she receives and perceives it. And it's going to affect how we connect back and forth, which is going to affect my needs being met.
So do you try to always avoid saying you shouldn't do this?
In a perfect world, I would not use should and shouldn't.
Mm-hmm.
I would communicate differently, but I would say 50% of the time I'm able to connect to my connection skills, and 50% of the time I fall short or I make a mess, and then I have to clean it up.
Right.
And
Now,
part of
how about if
being,
someone were to say,
yeah,
honey, this is your choice. Do whatever you want to do, but in my opinion, maybe you shouldn't do this. Can you get away with using the should word if you give it
oh
nuance?
yeah, it's not about the words.
Uh-huh.
If your belief using should is that there is one way to do things and anything else is not the right way,
Uh-huh.
that energy behind the should word is the
Uh-huh.
problem. If you're saying, hey, this is should, maybe you should or shouldn't, but this is what works for me, even if it doesn't work for you, that's a
Uh-huh.
different energy. So you could
Uh-huh.
use the word should, hey, it doesn't work for you, so maybe you shouldn't do this, but it works for me, so I should. That's a different energy than you shouldn't because what you're doing is wrong.
Uh-huh.
So it's not so much about the words as it is the energy and the intention behind the words. That's what people don't understand with nonviolent communication, because they will learn the words, but the energy behind them is still that sort of a violent energy, if you will. And then
Mm-hmm.
the words fall flat and they'll come back to me and say, the words don't work. And I'll say, the fact that you're trying to work it on somebody is the problem. You're trying to connect with that person and explore collaboratively and share what works for you and not be attached to what they do or don't do.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense, Glenn?
Yes, it does. Now, in Wellness to Wonderful, you have 9 pillars to health, and one of them is connection, the missing key to optimal health. So, is that the pillar that we're talking about now when we're talking about uh, uh, the should problem and how to relate to
So
people in
so
your
what we're
life?
talking about now is connection. And there's sort of 3 fundamental aspects. There's 9 pillars, but there's
Hmm.
the self and
Hmm.
regulation of your nervous system
Hmm.
and getting grounded and feeling safe so that you can then uh, resource your internal world, which is sleep and
Right.
nutrition and activity and play. And then
Right.
when you're resourced and grounded, then you can connect to the external world. And that's where
Right.
connection, it's almost all of it's those 4
Right.
pillars, which is connection to your family and friends, connection to your work and how you contribute to society, connection spiritually to something greater than yourself, and connection to the natural world, all the life on this planet.
Right.
So that's how connection is part of it, infuses everything. I talk
Right.
about connecting to yourself and then connecting to your external world.
Right. I'm realizing now the connection was actually uh, a factor in several different pillars.
Yes.
Um, and another one is what you just mentioned, play. So, play, the idea of playing can affect your health.
Yes, very much so. And play was actually the pillar that was most out of balance for me and the one that I spend the most time, because I have a very industrious personality type where I'm all about productivity and outcome and efficiency. So this idea of play is like for a long time was a waste of time. It was, even when I was playing, I was competitive to win, or I was competitive. I would, bet on sports games. I couldn't just watch the sports game for fun. I would want to, there had to be some value of winning almost. So that was a big turn for me. And most recently, um, actually, Chef AJ got me to do this. I've always wanted to do improv and comedy type stuff. And she said, "Hey, Matt, I'm helping her with the cancer. So a lot of what we're talking about is chemo and radiation and surgery." And she says, "Matt, people are lining up for chemo, radiation, and surgery, but they won't even, they're scared to death of improv." So I'm scared to death of chemo, radiation, and surgery, but improv never killed anybody.
Mhm.
And I said, that's right. And she asked me if I want to do it, and she said, "Let's do it." So I took a class, scared, I was terrified, and it's been the best thing. Now I'm doing multiple classes, and it's really helped me on so many levels of my personal and emotional growth. I couldn't believe it. It has nothing to do with being funny. And I could tell you more about that if you're interested. But it's been so impactful and something I look forward to that I didn't realize until I added it in how much it was missing from my life. And I think for a lot of people, especially adults, play was something that kids do. And stop playing around. Let's be productive. You got to do. Don't fool around. Let's make sure. This is you're not a kid. This is not playtime. All
Mhm.
that type of messaging. So it's missing in a lot of people's lives, and it's harming them.
Well, it's interesting that Chef AJ brought this element of play into your life. For those who don't know, AJ, with whom I was her co-author on a number of books, um, announced, I don't know, maybe 2 months ago or so, something that I was aware of, that she has a lung cancer diagnosis. And she has done a number of videos now that are available on YouTube in which she talks about that diagnosis, and she has um, uh, effectively chosen you, Dr. Matt, to be sort of her co-host when she discusses her cancer. Um, and she was reluctant to come out as having lung cancer because she feared the haters out there who might say, you're a vegan, you see what happens, or something like that. Um, how has how have you felt about your role in kind of holding her hand as she has come out and discussed this publicly?
Yeah, it's something that we do with different clients. We call it the crisis concierge, and it's basically helping people navigate healthcare crises because it's so overwhelming. There's so much information, there's so many doctors, there's so many people telling you what to do, there's so much internal poorness and fear and pain. And then how do you advocate for yourself and communicate with family and communicate with doctors? And then how do you navigate all of this so that you can figure out what really works best for you versus just doing what you're told? And the doctors try to care for the patients the best they can, but it's very much sort of a conveyor belt of this is how we treat this and do this, and here's the protocols, and fall in line, and next patient. And that's not, in my opinion, the best way to treat patients. So I've really enjoyed working with AJ and helping her get clear on information. And we look at studies and we talk about them, and I help her frame questions for specialists. I'll join some of her specialist appointments. And then I help her figure out what works best for her. It's not what I would do. It's not what anybody else would do. It's what would she do.
Mm-hmm.
And then I help her. I help advocate for her so that she can get that done and support her along the way. And that's really important. And it's very different than being the treating physician.
Yeah. Well, I've admired how brave she has been in discussing this and how it seems that her attitude is very positive as she's confronting really a life-threatening situation.
Yes. Yes. And she feels the whole range of emotions. She feels, she'll feel pleasant, excitement, inspired, like, hopeful, optimistic, and then she'll feel sad and beaten up and down and disappointed. And so it's this whole range that we feel.
Hmm.
And if you're not trying to block them and stop them or make them go away, it's this beautiful experience that they just sort of pass through.
Right.
And you can be there and support that passing without it ruining your life. And you get to this place of inner peace that you can experience no matter whether the emotion is pleasant or unpleasant.
Right. I haven't seen all her videos on this subject, but those I have seen, it seems like her more positive emotions are what come through
Mhm.
on YouTube, and
Yeah.
for the public, I think she is, um, you know, displaying her brave and optimistic side. Yeah. Um, well, let's go to one last pillar of health, which is spirituality. And how do you incorporate spirituality in your practice?
That's a very personal question for different people as far as what resonates for them. It's the idea of connecting to something bigger than you. And that can be a spiritual journey that's internal. It can be how you interact with other people. It can be religious. It can be completely secular. It can be have something to do with God. It can have nothing to do with God. It can, connect to the universe energetically. But there's something bigger than us. We're sort of all waves in the same ocean. And the more we can care about other people, and that we connect to the fact that caring for other people is caring for ourselves. Um, Interdependence. That's another one that's big in nonviolent communication. Nonviolent communication is actually a spiritual practice if you get to the core of what it is. There's a book, actually, a little pamphlet book called Practical Spirituality that Marshall, the creator of NVC, wrote. And I think that describes what NVC is better than any of his books. And the closest I can get to this concept of caring for someone else is like caring for myself, is having children. And when you give them your food because they're hungry, you feel like you're giving to yourself. In fact, I feel better than if I'm giving to myself. So if I have something that I'm going to eat and they're really hungry and I want to give it to them, they're super happy, or I hug them or I contribute to them, I feel like I'm giving to myself. It warms my body up. And it's very hard to do that to feel that way for your neighbor if that's not how you were brought up. I was brought up in a very independent framework where it's just us, it's just our family, take care of us. No one else is going to help you in a time of need, so you better be able to care for yourself. Um, Build up savings and money so that you can have money if you need it, because if you don't have money, no one else is going to help you and you're going to be on the streets. So there's this concept of take care of yourself at, first and foremost. And it's very hard to break that conditioning. Alona is much better at that than I am, for example. Alona is also much better at trusting the universe, and that there's to me, the when I can trust the universe, when I want something to happen now and it's not happening the way I want, and I'm like, I understand what it is, so let's do it now. And she'll say, no, we got to wait. It's not ready yet. Like there's this sort of this trust that it's going to unfold in the way it needs. That's hard for me. At the same time, I like thinking about a baby, and that it takes 9 months for a baby to develop. So if at month 4, I'm like, I want the baby now. If I take that baby out at 4 months, it won't even survive and it'll look really funny. So I know that I got to wait 9 months, and that if I wait 9 months, something magical is going to happen. But if I don't wait 9 months, it's not going to happen. And I just trust. And I don't know how it happens. I don't understand how it happens, but somehow everything falls into place and there's this amazing baby 9 months later. That to me is almost a spiritual experience. That ability that we sort of take for granted that it just happens. But for me, that's the type of trust that I would love to have in all aspects of my life. And it's a practice. It's something that you can cultivate. In fact, there's times where I'll want things to happen right now, or I'll want to just take care of myself. And when I give, in fact, my kids, they love getting presents for their friends. And I was more of like, oh, I should, you know, take care of me and myself. And it's been an evolution for me to, I knew I would give presents because that was the right thing to do. But my kids give presents because they get so much joy in seeing and picking it out and seeing their friends be happy. And if I'm being honest, I would have gotten presents, in the past because of it's the right thing to do. And I know what's accepted is getting presents for people on their birthday and on the holidays or whatever. But I want to connect to that part of my body that's giving because I'm receiving when I give. And in nonviolent communication, they talk about how true connection and nonviolence leads to give. You can't tell who's giving and who's receiving. You're both giving and you're both receiving. To me, that's part of spiritual practice that has nothing to do with God, but it's something that's greater than myself. It's bigger than myself. But it can include God. It can include all these other things too. So I don't know if talking about that helps clarify. Does that make it actually more confusing? What's your reaction to all that?
Well, everything you say is compelling. I find myself wondering when you're talking with patients who have different issues in their lives, physical and emotional. Does this come up? Is this part of your practice?
Yes, definitely is. And it all unfolds. And that's why every visit with every patient is different. And we work with people over a period of months and years, and it's weekly. And sometimes the focus is just what am I eating? Sometimes the focus is how am I communicating? And sometimes it's play, and sometimes it's around spiritual practice. Sometimes it's a combination. But it's figuring out based on what's going on in that person's life, what do we need to bring in from the 9 pillars that will support them most in their ongoing journey? And you never get to a place where all the pillars are figured out. It's like having 9 kids and expecting to get to a place where you don't have to worry about them anymore. You're always going to think about your kids. They're always going to need support.
Right.
And sometimes one kid needs more help than another. And that's one pillar needs more attention than another sometimes. So think of it as these 9 beautiful children that you have to give attention to. And when you give to them and you give attention to them, your life becomes more wonderful as a result. And it's a lifelong process that the doing the work is the reward. It's not do the work and then you'll get a reward afterwards. Doing the work is actually the reward in that moment.
That's well said, and I think that the people you work with are lucky to have you to be working with, and uh, I, it's been a pleasure speaking with you, Dr. Matt, and it's a remarkable journey you've had from training to be a conventional doctor to discovering how disillusioning that could be, to finding a way to make it work, to practice medicine in a new way, practice nutrition, and practice connection, and integrate it all into a whole new way of caring for people. People can find you at connectiondocs.com, you and Alona, and We will put a list of other links in the show notes where people can find you. And thank you, Dr. Matt.
Yeah, do you have time if I give one of the devices? Can I show people the device
Sure. The
I
WeBe
want to show
Calm
them?
device?
Yeah, the WeBe Calm device, which
Yeah,
is
show us
this.
about that.
So this is a device that I'm very proud of that Alona and I designed and have brought to fruition. And it's a device that helps people calm their nervous systems down. And it's practicing this breathing every night. We have them put it by their bed and do 5 to 10 repetitions where it forces you to slowly exhale, holding the ball up and this focused attention on the ball with some white noise. All of that stimulates the parasympathetic nervous system to calm the body. And by doing it every night before bed, you train the body so that at any moment during the day, you can take what we call a WeBe breath, because this is a WeBe Calm. You take a WeBe breath, and your body immediately knows how to calm and can jump into that calm, turn on that calm neural pathway or that calming muscle. And that's the key, is that part of the body. Remember, I told you the part of the body that can drive the car without you paying attention. We have to train that part how to turn on and feel calm. So even if your head wants you to be calm, that body won't turn on without this practice. And this is a great way. So if you blow,
How does it
watch
work?
what happens. Watch the ball. So you blow on it. And as I'm blowing out, watch the ball go up. And I try to hold that ball up for 10 seconds. So here we go. In through the nose. And then it comes out. And I repeat that 5 times. And then I can do another set of 5. And then you can put it by the bed. Just do that every night before bed to practice. And then when you need a WeBe breath, you just do that in through the nose, slow exhale. And your body, over a period of months, will have that conditioning, that muscle memory of calm. And it works great for kids. It works great for we marketed it towards kids, but it works just as well. Same device for adults. And it's been super helpful. But that's the key, is that calm is not a coincidence. It's a practice. And just practice. And it doesn't take a lot of practice to really change that trajectory as far as your ability to calm down in the heat of the moment.
So it becomes an emphasis on breath when you're under stress, and it helps you.
Yes, but it's training. The key is not just knowing how to take the breath in the heat of the moment. It doesn't work as a spot treatment as well. It's doing it every night so that in the heat of the moment, you've developed this muscle that when you do a slow exhale in through the nose and a slow exhale, it triggers that pathway that calms the body
Okay.
that you've built up and you've sort of accumulated sort of calm and an ability to turn on that parasympathetics that otherwise has not been worked out as well.
So then the access to that pathway will become autonomic.
Yes, it will be automatic if the access to turning on the parasympathetics, which is part of the autonomic nervous system, that will just start happening automatically.
Okay. All right. We will put a link to the WeBe Calm device where people can get it in the show notes. It's been a pleasure talking with you, Dr. Matt.
Hey, you too, Glenn. I enjoyed myself. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Be well. This has been the Glenn Mercer Show, where everyone listening turns vegan, regains their health, and annoys their friends and relatives. Find us on YouTube at The Glenn Mercer Show and across all your major podcast platforms. Don't forget to subscribe.